What if a single father, worn down by life but rich in kindness, walked into a corporate tower looking for a janitor job and unknowingly swept the dust off a woman's heart? This is not a fairy tale. It's a love story grounded in hard truths, gentle moments, and the kind of healing that doesn't shout. It simply shows up. And at the center of it all is a little girl with a crayon drawing, a woman who forgot how to smile, and a man who never stopped noticing the things that mattered. So if you believe in second chances, quiet heroes, and the magic of being seen for who you really are, stay with us. Before we begin, if these kinds of stories touch something in you, stories of love, kindness, and the power of ordinary people, please consider subscribing to the channel. It's completely free, and it helps us share more healing stories with people who might need them most. Now, let me tell you the story of the cleanest heart in the room. Struggling single dad showed up for a janitor job. The female CEO asked if he'd marry her instead. The cold came early that morning, thick and unforgiving, like an old debt finally called in. Wind swept across the city of Denver, hurling snow sideways and gnawing at every uncovered inch of skin. Luke Dawson wrapped his arms around his 6-year-old daughter, Lily, as they stepped off the bus near the towering glass building of HaleTech. Her tiny fingers clung to his collar, her cheeks red with wind, eyes wide beneath a wool hat 2 sizes too big. He adjusted the straps of her little backpack and whispered, "Almost there, sweetheart. Just a few more steps." The two trudged forward, past polished shoes and tailored coats that barely noticed them. Inside the building, warmth blasted from ceiling vents, and marble floors gleamed so clean Luke could see the reflection of his worn-out work boots. They looked out of place here, scuffed and salt-stained, like they'd walked through a dozen winters and barely survived. He guided Lily to the waiting area, a sleek lounge lined with abstract art and hushed conversations. A receptionist looked up briefly but said nothing as Luke sat down, pulling his daughter onto his lap. She curled into him instinctively, head against his chest. The scent of pine from the Christmas wreaths couldn't mask the underlying sterility of success. It wasn't their world, but they were trying. Luke reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a crumpled envelope. Inside was a copy of his resume. 2 pages, ink slightly smudged from sweat and hope. It had taken him 3 nights to write, not because of what to say, but how to make himself sound like more than just a man trying to keep the lights on. He used to build homes, good ones, then the accident, then the layoffs, then the silence that came after applications sent into the void. So when he saw the janitor position at HaleTech listed online, he took it as a sign. He didn't care if it was mopping floors or scrubbing sinks. What mattered was keeping Lily fed, clothed, and safe. "Are you nervous, Daddy?" Lily asked, her voice soft and sleepy. He looked into her eyes, so much like her mother's, though she barely remembered her. "Nope," he lied gently. "I've got my lucky girl with me. How could I not get the job?" She smiled, revealing the gap where her front tooth used to be. Luke kissed the top of her head just as the elevator pinged open across the lobby. From it stepped a woman in a winter white wool coat, her heels clicking softly against the floor. She had the kind of presence that made rooms hush a beat. Savannah Hale didn't dress for attention, but the world noticed anyway. Her expression was calm, unreadable, like the surface of a still lake hiding what storms lie beneath. She barely glanced at anyone, until her eyes landed on the only man in the room whose jacket had patches on the sleeves, and whose daughter clung to him like he was the last safe harbor in a storm. Luke didn't notice her at first. He was too busy drying Lily's hands with a cloth from his pocket, but Savannah noticed them. She paused, briefly. Something in her gaze softened, nostalgia maybe, or recognition of a different kind of strength. Then she turned and walked toward the reception desk. Luke caught her in his periphery and stood quickly, almost too quickly. His resume fluttered to the floor, and he bent to retrieve it just as Savannah turned. For one surreal second, they locked eyes. Hers were green-gray, intelligent, and sharper than they appeared at a distance. His were a shade of blue that looked tired, but not broken. Honest eyes. She nodded once, polite but distant. He gave a small smile. The kind you offer to someone you'll probably never see again. But fate has a strange sense of humor. The receptionist gestured toward him. "Mr. Dawson, please go up to the 22nd floor. Ms. Hale will see you now." Luke blinked. Ms. Hale? He looked at Lily, then at the desk again. Yes, the CEO. She requested to do the interview personally. Lily gasped. The boss lady? Luke crouched beside her. I'll be right back, baby. Sit tight, okay? He took the elevator up with a confused mind and a fast heart. He wasn't dressed for a CEO's office. He wasn't prepared for anything but a mop and a key ring. On the 22nd floor, glass and steel stretched endlessly. The view behind Savannah's desk revealed a city blanketed in white. She stood by the window, arms crossed, her coat now draped over a leather chair. She turned slowly as he entered. I like to meet everyone who might join my team, she said without preamble. Even the people who keep the lights on and the floors shining. Luke swallowed. I didn't expect, thank you for taking the time. She motioned for him to sit, then glanced at his resume. You built homes before? Yes, ma'am. And now you're applying to clean offices? Yes, ma'am. Why? He didn't flinch. Because it's honest work, and because I have a little girl who needs more than just love to get by. There was silence. The kind of silence that speaks. Savannah tapped a finger against her desk once, twice. Then she looked at him with something gentler than before. I admire that, she said. We'll be in touch. Luke nodded, stood, and walked to the door. Mr. Dawson, Savannah added just as he reached for the handle. Yes? Your daughter. She called me the boss lady? He smiled sheepishly. Kids say the darndest things. Savannah's lips curved. Not quite a smile, but the idea of one. I like her already. The snowstorm outside raged through the afternoon, but within the gleaming walls of HaleTech's headquarters, time seemed to move with a different rhythm. Precise, clinical, almost quiet. Luke had returned to the lobby, cheeks tinged red, his mind still reeling from the unexpected interview with the CEO herself. Lily perched patiently on a lounge chair, lit up when she saw him. She ran to his side, mittens flapping, her backpack bouncing behind her. Did you get it? She asked in a whisper, as though the walls might listen. Luke smiled softly, resting a hand on her head. I'm not sure, baby girl, but the boss lady said she liked you. Lily beamed. Maybe she needs a princess on her team too. He chuckled and pulled her close. If only jobs were earned with sweetness alone, Lily would have been CEO years ago. Meanwhile, 22 floors above, Savannah Hale stood at her office window, watching the snow drift sideways past the city skyline. Her assistant, Danielle, entered quietly, a tablet in hand. I canceled the next 2 calls just like you asked, Danielle said. Anything else? Savannah hesitated. That man who came in for the janitor job, Luke Dawson. Danielle blinked. You want a follow-up? Savannah shook her head. Not yet. Just keep his file at the top of the pile. Danielle lingered, curiosity in her eyes, but knew better than to ask. Savannah Hale wasn't known for sentiment. She was known for building a tech empire from scratch, surviving 2 hostile takeovers, and being the youngest female CEO to make Forbes twice before 40. But something in her voice had softened, and that, to those who knew her, was almost alarming. That evening in their modest apartment, Luke cooked dinner while Lily colored at the table. The scent of grilled cheese and tomato soup warmed the space more than the flickering radiator ever could. She had pretty hair, Lily said suddenly. Luke turned from the stove. Who? The boss lady. She looked like someone in a movie. Luke smiled. You think so? Lily nodded, dragging a crayon across the page. She looked lonely. He paused, spatula midair. What makes you say that? I don't know, Lily shrugged. She had those eyes, like the librarian does when no one borrows books. Luke stared at his daughter. She had a way of seeing people that made him both proud and a little awed. He plated the food and sat beside her, gently brushing her hair from her face. People can look strong on the outside and still be missing something inside, he said quietly. Like when you didn't have work, Lily asked. He nodded. Just like that. 2 days passed with no word from HaleTech. Luke didn't expect a miracle, but he hoped for one. He filled out other job applications, fixed a neighbor's broken step for gas money, and helped shovel snow for Mrs. Tanner in apartment 4B. He didn't complain. He'd learned long ago that resilience wasn't loud. It was quiet, steady, like breathing. On the 3rd day, a sleek black car pulled up in front of their building. Lily pressed her face to the window. There's a fancy car out there, Daddy. Luke looked up from the sink, dish towel in hand. A knock came. He opened the door to find a driver in a suit holding a sealed envelope. No words, just a nod and a handover. Inside the envelope was a typed letter, signed at the bottom in ink that shimmered slightly. Dear Mr. Dawson, we would be pleased to offer you the janitorial position at HaleTech, effective immediately. You are invited to a company luncheon this Friday. Feel free to bring your daughter. Savannah Hale Luke sat back in the kitchen chair, staring at the paper. Lily bounced in her seat. We got it? He exhaled slowly, nodding. We got it. Friday came quickly. Luke ironed his one good shirt, creased but clean, and polished his boots until they could almost pass for decent. Lily wore her nicest dress, pink with faded flowers, and a sparkly clip that used to belong to her mother. At HaleTech, they were guided to a rooftop garden, surprisingly lush despite the season, thanks to heating systems and glass panels. Tables were arranged in elegant rows, and music played softly in the background. Luke felt like a guest at someone else's wedding. Then Savannah arrived. She wore navy blue, simple, tailored, striking. Her gaze swept the crowd and landed on Lily first. She smiled. Miss Boss Lady, Lily called cheerfully, earning a ripple of polite laughter from those nearby. Savannah approached them, crouching to Lily's eye level. Are you excited to start your new job, Miss Dawson? Lily giggled. Daddy got the job. I'm just the assistant. Savannah looked up at Luke, her expression unreadable for a moment. You clean more than floors, Mr. Dawson. I saw that on day one. He didn't know what to say, so he simply said, Thank you. She straightened and looked out at her guests, then back at Luke. You ever think about how sometimes people come into your life not to fix it, but to remind you what was worth building in the first place? He didn't answer right away, but something inside him stirred. He had built things his whole life, houses, furniture, plans that never worked out. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to build something else. The Monday morning sky above Denver was still nursing the last bruises of the storm. Pale blue pressed against low-hanging clouds, and the city buzzed slowly back to life. But inside HaleTech, everything gleamed as if the blizzard never happened. Luke Dawson arrived 20 minutes early. He wore the same uniform they had issued him. Dark navy coveralls with a name patch he hadn't asked for, but appreciated. It reminded him of the days when he had a trade, a title. Luke stitched over the chest, like a quiet reintroduction to the world. His first job, the main lobby. He was given a cart with supplies, a key ring heavy with doors he hadn't yet opened, and a clipboard detailing assigned cleaning zones. But nobody mentioned the jammed file cabinet in the HR hallway or the constantly flickering light in the second-floor break room. Nobody said a thing about the basement's leaky faucet or the loose stair railing on the fire escape. Luke noticed all of it, and by noon he'd fixed 3 of the 4. Downstairs, Savannah Hale sat behind her wide desk, flipping through the morning reports. Her assistant, Danielle, stood across from her with a familiar tension in her shoulders. There's been chatter about the new hire, Danielle said finally. Savannah didn't look up. Let them chatter. They say he repaired the water line near accounting before the facilities team even logged the ticket. Maintenance is unsure whether he's showing them up or doing them a favor. Savannah set her pen down and met Danielle's gaze. He's not here to impress anyone. He's here to work, and clearly he's doing that well. Danielle shifted. He also reorganized the supply closet. Savannah raised an eyebrow. He what? Alphabetized everything. Even found 6 missing light bulbs and a box of paper towels from 2019. A beat passed. Then a smile tugged at the corner of Savannah's mouth, barely visible, but real. Remind me, she said, returning to her report. What's the job title we gave him? Janitor. She looked out the window. Feels inadequate. By Tuesday, Luke had made quiet rounds through every floor except the executive wing. Not because he wasn't allowed. He just didn't feel ready. He patched a scuff on the lobby wall using leftover paint he'd found in storage. He rewired a faulty hand dryer in the 3rd floor restroom. He adjusted the height of every crooked wall frame in the hallway outside finance, because they'd been just off center, and that bothered him. No one asked him to. He just saw things other people ignored. That afternoon, while replacing a bulb in the stairwell, A young man from the IT department paused and watched. "You always go this hard?" the guy asked. Luke wiped his hands. "Only on days that end in I." The man smirked and held out his hand. "Josh, welcome aboard." That handshake was the first of many. By Thursday, word had traveled. Some folks raised their coffee cups when Luke walked by. A few nodded respectfully. One woman in marketing left a thank you note taped to a newly polished mirror, written in pink ink. "We notice, and we appreciate." Luke didn't read too much into it. He wasn't here for recognition. He was here because rent didn't pay itself, and Lily still needed new shoes. But there was something satisfying about making things better, even in small, quiet ways. That evening, after his shift, he passed the executive elevator on the way out. The doors opened. Savannah stood inside, talking to someone on a Bluetooth earpiece. She paused when she saw him. Their eyes met. She gave him a quick nod, then gestured toward the panel. "You going down?" He hesitated. "I was about to take the stairs." She arched a brow. "You've already fixed 3 light fixtures, 2 leaky pipes, and a dozen minor annoyances this week. I think you've earned the elevator." He stepped in. The doors slid closed. She ended her call and leaned against the side wall, arms crossed. "You don't miss anything, do you?" "I try not to. Even the details nobody else notices. That's usually where the real problems hide." She studied him a moment. "Where'd you learn that?" Luke glanced at the floor indicators. "Being a dad, being broke, both'll teach you to watch what others ignore." She didn't laugh, but she didn't look away either. "You're not what I expected," she said. "Neither are you," he replied. The elevator stopped. Before the doors opened, she said quietly, "I meant that as a compliment." Luke looked at her. "So did I." Then she was gone, heels clicking into the marble hallway, her silhouette swallowed by the glow of the top floor. That night back home, Luke tucked Lily into bed. She was halfway through a storybook when she blinked sleepily and asked, "Did you fix anything big today?" Luke smiled. "Only a few little things." She yawned. "Those matter too." He nodded. "Sometimes they matter the most." He turned off the light, sat by the door for a few minutes longer than usual, thinking not about what he'd done, but how, for the first time in a long while, he felt useful again. Not just needed, valued. And that made all the difference. Savannah Hale was not used to receiving handwritten notes. Her world ran on emails, executive summaries, and digital signatures. So when she found a folded sheet of paper lying neatly on her desk that Friday morning, nestled beside her latte and glowing monitor, she nearly ignored it. But the childlike scrawl stopped her hand mid-reach. She unfolded the page. A crayon drawing greeted her first. A stick figure woman in high heels and a triangle dress stood next to a tall man holding a mop. Between them was a little girl with yellow pigtails, arms raised like she was flying. Above their heads floated a smiling sun and a crooked rainbow. Underneath, in pink marker, were 5 words written with proud imperfection. "Thank you for my daddy." Savannah's hand stilled. For a long moment, the quiet of her office wrapped around her like a blanket she didn't know she needed. She stared at the drawing again, its innocence, its sincerity. Then she leaned back in her chair and exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Downstairs, Luke was changing out a faulty light panel near the marketing wing when Savannah found him. "Mr. Dawson," she called, voice neutral but firm. He looked up from the ladder. "Ma'am?" She held up the paper. "Your daughter's work." His eyes widened. "Oh, yes, ma'am. I didn't know she left it on your desk. I told her not to wander up here." Savannah shook her head. "She didn't leave it. My assistant said she handed it directly to her and asked that I read it before lunch." Luke winced. "She means well. I hope it didn't cross a line." "No," Savannah said softly. "It didn't." There was a silence. Then she handed the drawing back. "I've never received anything like this before. From anyone." Luke tucked the paper gently into his back pocket, his expression thoughtful. "She thinks you gave me a second chance." Savannah tilted her head. "And what do you think?" "I think," he paused, lowering the ladder, "some people lead with money, others with fear. But you—" He hesitated, trying to find the right word. "You lead with grace, even when you don't say it out loud." Savannah's lips parted slightly, caught off guard by the sincerity in his voice. She wasn't used to compliments that didn't come with flattery or an agenda. Thank you, she said finally. Anytime. She turned to leave, then stopped and looked back. Tell Lily, she's a better communicator than most department heads. Luke smiled. She'll be thrilled. That weekend, Savannah found herself standing outside the old public library on West 12th Street. It had been nearly 20 years since she'd set foot inside. The building had been part of her childhood, back when her mother still believed in quiet places and her father hadn't yet bought her silence with boarding schools and gold watches. Inside, nothing had changed. The floors creaked in the same places. The air still carried the scent of worn pages and memories too fragile for daylight. She wandered into the children's section without meaning to. A little girl sat on the floor, legs crossed, reading aloud to a stuffed rabbit in her lap. The scene brought back a pang she hadn't expected. She remembered being that small, and she remembered the first time someone told her reading was a waste of time if it doesn't lead to results. Back then, she'd believed them. She didn't anymore. Monday came with the cold clarity of early February. Luke arrived on time as always and made his way to the mailroom to fix a jammed sorting machine. The mailroom clerk, an elderly man named Jerry, offered him a cup of lukewarm coffee in a paper cup. You've been here, what, 2 weeks? Jerry asked, squinting at him. Just about. Already doing more than the guys who've been here 2 years. Luke shrugged. Just trying to help where I can. Jerry nodded. This place could use more people like you. Luke smiled. I think every place could. That afternoon, he passed Savannah in the hallway outside the boardroom. She was walking fast, phone in one hand, tablet in the other, voice low and clipped. But when she saw him, she paused. Mr. Dawson. He stopped mid-step. Yes, ma'am? I wanted to ask you something. She glanced down the hallway, then stepped closer, her voice lowering. Would you be willing to help evaluate some safety issues in the older parts of the building? You seem to have an eye for things most people miss. Luke blinked, surprised. Sure, I'd be happy to. Good. She tucked the tablet under her arm. I'll have someone email you access clearance. He nodded. Thank you for trusting me with that. Her eyes met his. You've earned it. And for the first time since joining HaleTech, Luke felt something more than useful. He felt seen. That evening, as he and Lily sat in their favorite corner booth at a local diner, she chattered about a reading contest at school and how she wanted to win a big shiny ribbon for reading the most books. Luke listened, content, until she paused and asked, Do you think Miss Savannah's lonely? He blinked. Why would you say that? She smiles like someone who used to smile a lot but forgot how. He stared at her for a long beat, then reached for her tiny hand across the table. You might be right, he murmured. Maybe we can help her remember. The forecast hadn't warned them. Not properly. The snowstorm swept in fast and brutal, swallowing the Denver skyline by mid-afternoon. By 5 o'clock, most of HaleTech's employees had gone home. Those who stayed behind gathered near windows, watching the parking lot disappear into a white blur. Cars stuck, roads closed, cell service flickered. By 6, the power went out. Luke was on the lower floor when the lights died, changing a flickering fixture outside the legal department. The sudden darkness was complete, a smothering black that startled even him. He froze for a moment, then reached for the flashlight on his tool belt, clicking it on with the calm reflexes of a man who'd handled worse. The emergency generator kicked in seconds later, humming from somewhere deep in the building's gut. Dim backup lights flickered to life in the hallways, casting a pale, uncertain glow. Luke exhaled. Not fear, just focus. He made his way to the security office first. Inside, the building's oldest night guard, Reuben, was shivering despite his coat, a hand over the space heater that wasn't working anymore. You okay? Luke asked. Reuben grunted. Generator's only powering half the building. Basement's out. Vents are down too. Cold's leaking in. Luke nodded. Stay here. I'll check the panels. You sure? I've handled worse in a winter like this. Savannah had stayed late for a board call that kept getting delayed. When the lights dimmed, she stood at her window, watching her city vanish behind thick flurries. She didn't panic. She never did. But something about the silence that followed felt different tonight. Not dangerous. Just hollow. Danielle had already left. Most of the top floor execs, too. She pulled on her coat and headed toward the stairs. By the time she reached the second floor, The halls felt abandoned. Then she saw the light, moving slowly, steadily, like a will of its own. Luke. He was carrying a second flashlight now, as if expecting to give it away. His sleeves were pushed up, and snow clung to his shoulders, dampening the fabric. He paused when he saw her. "Didn't expect you still here," he said. "Didn't expect you to be on rescue duty," she replied. Luke gave a lopsided grin. "I tend to hang around when things break." Savannah hesitated, then fell into step beside him. "You know the backup grid?" she asked. "I've learned it faster than I planned to." She studied him as they moved. "You always stay this calm in a crisis?" He turned his head slightly. "The world doesn't get less broken if you panic." Something about the way he said it made her chest tighten. It wasn't a line. It was lived-in truth. They descended to the basement together. The cold hit them first, sharp and unforgiving, the kind that seeped into your knuckles and spine. Luke led them past storage rooms and rusted old systems left from previous tenants. The boiler groaned as they passed. In the far corner, next to a series of emergency panels, Luke crouched to check a fuse. Savannah stood behind him, arms wrapped tightly across her chest. "You shouldn't be down here," he said without looking back. "I'm not much good in the boardroom without light," she answered. He smiled at the fuse box. "Fair enough." As he worked, Savannah's eyes scanned the room. Among the dust and cables sat an old folding cot, part of an outdated shelter plan. A threadbare blanket was still tucked into the frame. "You ever think this building has ghosts?" she asked suddenly. Luke paused. "You believe in that?" She shrugged. "Not ghosts exactly, just the energy we leave behind when we forget to care." He didn't respond at first. Then quietly he said, "Some buildings are more alive than the people inside them." Savannah turned toward him, startled by how true that felt. A few minutes later, the fuse clicked. A surge of life returned to the vents, and a distant hum followed. "Heat's back," he said. She exhaled. "You just saved half the office from hypothermia. Guess I earned my paycheck." "No," she replied. "You earned something more than that." He looked at her. She hesitated. "You remind me of someone," she said. "Someone I knew before all this. Someone good. Someone real." They climbed the stairs in silence. When they reached the ground floor, Savannah stopped. "I'm going to check on Reuben." Luke nodded. "Already did. He's warm now. And the others." "I lit up the vending area with spare bulbs from supply. Someone's passing out snacks like it's Halloween. People will be fine." She smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't quite reach the mouth, but lingers in the eyes. "You're not just fixing things here," she said quietly. "You're changing the way people feel about this place." Luke took a moment. It's easier to care about something when someone else already does. Their eyes met in the half-light. There was nothing romantic in that moment, just connection, something quietly human. "I should head out," he said. "Lily's staying with the neighbor tonight. She's expecting a story before bed." Savannah tilted her head. "What story will you tell her?" He smiled. "Probably something about ghosts who fix things in the dark." She chuckled. "I'd read that." He tipped his head in farewell and walked toward the exit, boots echoing softly across the tile. Savannah stood there for a long time, surrounded by a world she had built. And for the first time in years, it didn't feel empty. It felt like the beginning of something she didn't yet have words for. The Hail Tech Gala was an annual tradition, a corporate affair drenched in polished speeches and well-rehearsed smiles. Usually held in the rooftop atrium, it was a night reserved for C-suite mingling, award presentations, and carefully choreographed networking. This year, though, something shifted. Savannah Hale, ever the pragmatist, had insisted on extending invitations beyond the usual circle of executives and investors. The team called it outreach. She called it overdue. Luke Dawson received his invite 2 days before the event, hand-delivered by Danielle, who'd shown up with a warm smile and a note from Savannah. "Your table is near the garden wall. Dress however makes you feel comfortable. You've already earned your place." He'd stared at the envelope long after she left. Lily, however, had no such pause. "We're going to a party," she squealed, spinning in a slow circle on their old carpet. "Do you think there will be cake? Or glitter? Or maybe balloons shaped like raccoons?" Luke chuckled, ruffling her hair. "Sweetheart, I'm not sure that's the vibe they're going for." Still, he ironed his one decent shirt again, creased but presentable, and found a pair of dark slacks he hadn't worn since the last job interview that led to nowhere. He borrowed a clip-on tie from a neighbor and shined his boots until they looked almost new. Lily wore her favorite dress, pink with worn flowers, and insisted on adding a sparkly headband. "You look like royalty," he said as he fastened her coat. "I feel like a superhero," she replied with a grin. The atrium shimmered. Lights hung from the glass ceiling in strings of gold, glowing like stars against the city's night skyline. Tables were draped in linen and candlelight. Jazz spilled from a live quartet in the corner, elegant and timeless. Luke paused at the threshold, one hand resting on Lily's shoulder. He felt out of place, like a carpenter who'd wandered into a ballroom by mistake. But Lily stepped forward without hesitation, her eyes wide with wonder. "Daddy, this place is magic." He smiled despite himself. "Maybe it is." A waiter greeted them, gesturing toward their table. Luke was halfway through scanning the room for familiar faces when Savannah appeared. She was dressed in navy silk, simple, understated, breathtaking. Her hair was swept back, and she wore no jewelry, only confidence. She walked toward them with quiet assurance, but her eyes softened when they met Lily's. "You must be the artist," she said. Lily beamed. "Are you the boss lady?" Savannah nodded. "Only part-time." Luke laughed, tension dissolving just a little. "I'm glad you came," she said, now turning to him. "It wouldn't feel right without you." Luke looked around. "I'm not sure I fit the dress code." "You fit the intention," she said gently. That stopped him. Dinner passed in a warm blur, conversations with people Luke had only known in passing, a few genuine laughs, even a compliment on his daughter's drawing from a man in IT who asked for a copy. Savannah watched from a distance for a while. There was something grounding about seeing Luke in this space, not adjusting fixtures or clearing supplies, but just present, at ease. Halfway through the evening, the lights dimmed slightly. The quartet began a slow, lilting tune. People began to rise, drifting toward the open center floor. Lily tugged Luke's sleeve. "Dance with me, Daddy." He hesitated, looking at his boots. "Are you sure?" She nodded, already pulling him. They moved to the edge of the floor. Luke clumsily took her hands and she giggled as they swayed, her feet on top of his boots, her laughter bubbling like a spring. Around them, polished shoes spun in graceful arcs. Luke, in his too-big jacket and tired posture, looked wildly out of place, until Savannah stepped forward. She reached out a hand. "May I?" Lily blinked. "With Daddy?" Savannah smiled. "Only if he agrees." Luke looked from his daughter to Savannah, then back again, and something in Lily's eyes, the hope, the delight, answered for him. He took Savannah's hand. They moved slowly, tentatively at first. Luke had never danced in a suit. Savannah hadn't danced with anyone without expectations for years. Her hand found his shoulder. His found the curve of her waist. They moved in unison, unpracticed but steady, like two people rediscovering how connection feels. Around them, the room faded. "I didn't think you'd say yes," she murmured. "I didn't think you'd ask," she smiled. "I've surprised myself lately." He nodded. "I've noticed." There was silence, comfortable and rare. Then she said, "You don't talk about her much." He knew who she meant. "My wife passed when Lily was 4, he said quietly. "Car accident. She was good, solid. The kind of woman who folded towels perfectly and laughed at her own jokes." "I'm sorry," Savannah said. "So am I. Every day. But Lily..." He looked toward the edge of the floor where his daughter now spun in slow circles, arms out. "She saved me." Savannah followed his gaze. "And maybe now you're saving her back." He looked into her eyes then. Really looked. "You don't have to lead everything alone, you know." Savannah didn't reply, but her fingers tightened slightly in his. The song ended. They parted slowly, neither in a rush. "Thank you," Savannah said. "For what?" "For dancing with a woman who forgot how to be asked." Luke offered a half smile. "Thank you for reminding a man who forgot what it meant to be seen." As he returned to his table, Lily ran up and hugged him tight. "You looked happy," she whispered. "I was," he said, and for once he meant it with every cell in his body. The Monday after the gala carried a strange hush, like the air after a thunderclap. Hailtech's usual rhythm had returned. Keyboards clicking, coffee brewing, meetings booked on back-to-back calendars, but something unspoken lingered. Luke noticed it in the way people paused their conversations when he walked by. Not coldness, just curiosity with edges. Polite smiles held longer than usual. A few hallway glances shifted faster than they should have. Something was different. By lunchtime, he had his answer. He was cleaning the executive lounge when Danielle entered, her usually composed expression now clouded with discomfort. "Luke," she said quietly, glancing around, "Savannah wants to speak with you. Now." Luke nodded, wiping his hands on a rag, and followed her down the hall. His steps were steady, but inside something coiled tight in his chest. They took the back elevator up to the 22nd floor. Savannah stood near her desk, arms crossed, back straight. The windows behind her were bright with midday light, but her eyes were shadowed. She waited until Danielle left the room before speaking. "There was a meeting this morning," she said. Luke didn't sit. "Let me guess, I was on the agenda." Savannah gave a small, tight nod. "HR didn't initiate it," she added. "It came from the board." Luke's jaw tightened. "And? They want you removed from public-facing areas, effective immediately." He swallowed. "Because I danced with the CEO?" Savannah didn't smile. "Because I danced with a janitor." The silence that followed was sharp, not hostile, but filled with the kind of truth that didn't need to be explained. "I told them no," she said. Luke looked at her, unsure whether to feel relieved or guilty. "I don't want to cause trouble." "You didn't," she said. "They just like their world neat, controlled, familiar." Luke nodded slowly. "And I don't fit." "You fit," Savannah said firmly. "They just haven't updated their definitions." For a moment her voice faltered, softer now. "But I can't fight them on every front. Not this way. Not yet." Luke didn't respond right away. He looked past her, at the skyline, the glass, the power she wielded, and the cage it had become. "Maybe I should go," he said finally. "You've got a company to protect." Her head snapped up. "You think I care more about their approval than my own judgment?" "No," he said. "But I know how people like that work. They wear down the good ones until they're tired enough to fold." Savannah stepped forward. "Then let me be the one who doesn't fold." Luke shook his head. "You've already given me more than most." "Luke?" "No." He raised a hand, gentle but firm. "Don't lose more battles just because you took a chance on someone like me." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You're not someone like anything, Luke. You're the most decent thing this building has seen in years." He offered a sad smile. "That's why I should leave, so the building doesn't forget it." Luke packed up his small locker in the maintenance room that evening. Just a pair of gloves, a notepad with scribbled repair logs, and the drawing Lily made, the one Savannah had once held. He slipped it carefully into a folder and zipped his coat. No goodbyes, no announcement. Only the quiet way he'd entered, and the quiet way he left. That night, Savannah didn't go home. She sat in her office long after the sun dipped behind the mountains, the city lights below blinking like questions she no longer had answers to. She kept thinking of the way Luke had looked at her, not angry, not resentful, just resolved, like a man who knew he couldn't win in someone else's house, no matter how clean he kept it. Danielle came in around 9 with a glass of water. She hesitated before placing it on the desk. "Do you want me to draft the official exit memo?" Savannah shook her head. "Write nothing," she said. "Let silence be their memo." Meanwhile, Luke sat on the worn couch in his apartment. Lily curled up beside him, fast asleep under a patchwork quilt. The TV hummed faintly in the background, but he wasn't watching. He held the drawing in his hands again. "Thank you for my daddy." His chest tightened. He thought about all the things he hadn't said, how he didn't regret a moment of it, how dancing with Savannah had felt less like a mistake and more like a memory he wanted to keep. She had looked at him like he was a man worth seeing, and that look alone might have been worth everything. The next morning, Luke slipped out early to fix the fence behind Mrs. Tanner's building. She didn't ask him to, but it leaned too far west, and he couldn't stop noticing things that needed repair. A habit, a calling. He wasn't sure anymore. By midday, he had the boards realigned and the gate swinging smooth. As he wiped the sweat from his brow, a familiar voice called out, "I told you not to leave without saying goodbye." He turned. Savannah stood at the sidewalk's edge, her heels clicking softly against the frosted concrete. Luke straightened. "I didn't want to make it harder." "You didn't," she said. "You just made it emptier." They stood in silence for a long beat. Finally, she reached into her coat and pulled out a folded slip of paper. "What's that?" "A list," she said, "of all the things wrong with the building you never had the chance to fix." He arched a brow. She stepped closer. "And at the bottom I added one more." He unfolded it. It read, "This company stopped feeling like mine the day you walked out the door." Luke stared at it, heart thudding in his chest. Then she added softly, "And I'm not ready to give it up." Savannah Hale wasn't used to showing up on people's doorsteps. Her life was lived in elevators and boardrooms, chauffeured town cars and conference lounges, always arriving, never simply showing up. But that afternoon, standing outside Luke Dawson's apartment building, she felt strangely human. She clutched the envelope tighter in her coat pocket. It wasn't an apology. She wasn't sure what it was exactly, but it had felt important to write, necessary even, as if she couldn't keep going until she delivered it. She pressed the buzzer for apartment 3C. A child's voice answered. "Hello." "Hi, Lily, it's Savannah. Is your dad home?" A pause, then, "Just a second." The door buzzed open. Savannah smiled, heart unsteady. Inside, the apartment was warm but humble, well kept but lived in. Savannah noticed the details immediately. A coat rack built from reclaimed wood, a wall shelf filled with secondhand books, a framed drawing of a house with 3 stick figures, taped carefully above the couch. Luke stood in the kitchen, drying his hands on a dish towel. He looked surprised, but not displeased. "Didn't expect to see you today." "I figured," Savannah said, stepping in, removing her gloves. "But I had something I wanted to say in person." Lily, perched at the table with a half-finished peanut butter sandwich, waved. "Hi, boss lady." Savannah laughed. "Hi, artist." Luke gestured toward the living room. "Can I get you some tea or something warm?" "I'm fine, thank you." She took a seat on the couch, smoothing her skirt. "Actually, I was hoping for something simpler. A few minutes of honesty." Luke sat across from her, elbows resting on his knees. "You've always had that." She hesitated. Then she pulled the envelope from her coat and handed it to him. He opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed but signed in Savannah's hand. "Luke, there's a difference between giving someone a job and giving them a reason to stay. You gave me the second one. You reminded me what it felt like to care about more than just profit margins and public image. If you're willing, I'd like to offer you something else. Not just your position back, but a new one. One where your instincts and integrity won't be wasted. A role that matters. I can't change how they see the world overnight, but I can start with how I run mine. Let me know if you'll consider it." Savannah Luke read it twice, then once more. He looked up, eyes steady. "Why me?" She leaned back. "Because the building felt colder after you left. Because people smiled less. Because I did." He held the letter for a long moment, then folded it neatly. "Lily," he called gently, "can you give us a moment?" Lily nodded and skipped to her room, trailing bits of bread crust behind her. When the door shut, Luke looked back at Savannah. "I never wanted anything more than to work hard and be decent," he said. "But that place, it gave me purpose. Like I was fixing more than just light bulbs." Savannah's voice softened. "You were. But if I come back," he continued, "it has to be for the right reasons. Not just because it makes the company look generous. Not because I'm a charity case." Her eyes didn't waver. "It'll be because I trust your judgment more than most of my managers, and because I'm tired of buildings full of people who only care about their titles." Luke smiled faintly. "I've never had one of those." "You will," she said, "if you want it." That night, Savannah stayed for dinner. Nothing fancy, just baked macaroni and green beans from a can. But it was warm and honest and filled with Lily's laughter as she told jokes that barely made sense, but still made them all smile. At one point, Savannah found herself helping wash dishes, her sleeves rolled up, suds clinging to her watch. Luke stood beside her, drying plates, their movements in quiet rhythm. "You've never looked so not CEO," he teased. She smirked. "Don't tell the shareholders." When the dishes were done, they returned to the living room, and Lily curled up in Savannah's lap as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Can we keep her?" Lily whispered to her dad. Luke chuckled. "We'll see, kiddo." Savannah looked down, smiling softly. "That's the nicest offer I've had all year." Later, as she stood by the door, coat in hand, Luke walked her out. The hallway light buzzed overhead, casting their shadows long against the wall. "Whatever happens next," Luke said, "thank you for coming here, for saying what you said." Savannah looked up at him. "You deserve a life that doesn't feel borrowed, Luke, and I'd like to be part of helping you build that, if you'll let me." He nodded slowly. "You already are." The following Friday, the atmosphere at HaleTech felt different, not because the policies had changed or because the board had grown softer overnight, but because one man was walking the halls again. Luke Dawson was back, not with a mop or a rolling cart, but with a clipboard and a badge that now read, Facilities Supervisor. A small title, but honest, real, and earned. He spent the morning inspecting stairwells and testing alarms. He took calls from 3 different departments about minor repairs and offered solutions before they finished describing the problems. He even found time to fix a jammed office window that had stuck shut for months. But by noon, he found himself in a hallway he hadn't visited since that first week, the executive wing. He paused outside Savannah's office. The door was open. She sat behind her desk, sleeves rolled, glasses perched low on her nose, eyes focused on a budget sheet that clearly bored her to tears. When she looked up and saw him, the change in her expression was so subtle only someone like Luke would catch it. He knocked on the doorframe anyway, just to be polite. "Room for a supervisor?" "Always," she said, setting the papers aside. Luke stepped in. "They're using the 3rd floor conference room for some kind of leadership training. HR forgot to book the HVAC team in advance. You might hear some complaints." She smiled. "You're still fixing things before they break." He shrugged. "Easier that way." There was a pause. Then she stood and walked to a nearby shelf, retrieving a small rectangular box wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. "I have something for you." Luke looked wary. "Did I forget a birthday?" She handed it to him. "Open it." Inside was a folded cloth, soft, clean, and pale blue. A handkerchief. Embroidered in the corner, in elegant thread, was a tiny drawing of a broom and a hammer crossed like emblems. Below it, "Start where it's broken. Stay until it's better." Luke blinked, moved in a way he couldn't quite describe. "My mother used to say that," Savannah explained, "before life got too complicated for small things like handkerchiefs and mottos." Luke ran a thumb over the stitching. "It's beautiful. It's yours." Sorry, he folded it carefully and tucked it into his pocket like something sacred. That evening, Savannah sent out a company-wide memo. No press release, no social media post, just an internal message, brief, purposeful, and written with rare candor. "Dear team, today we welcome back someone whose quiet work has kept our building and our culture stronger than many realize. Luke Dawson reminds us that integrity is not a title, and leadership does not always wear a suit. Please join me in officially welcoming him as our facilities supervisor. More importantly, take a moment to notice what he notices, things others miss because they matter quietly. And if you're lucky, you might learn something from the way he listens." Savannah Luke read it that night with Lily asleep beside him, her hand still clutching her crayon sketch of the garden she hoped he'd build someday. He didn't know how many people would truly understand the message, but he understood it, and that was enough. The next week passed in steady, quiet ways. Luke settling into his new role, Savannah returning to her whirlwind of investor calls and product launches. Yet the distance between them seemed to shrink in invisible ways. Small meetings turned into shared coffee. Updates turned into slow conversations. One morning, Savannah stood beside Luke as he repaired a loose bench plank in the rooftop garden. "You know," she said, brushing her fingers across the wooden armrest, "this used to be my favorite place in the whole building." "Used to?" She shrugged. "Stopped coming after my father died. It didn't feel mine anymore." Luke looked up. "It does now?" Her eyes softened. "It does when you're here." He smiled, quiet and true. That Friday, Savannah walked into her office to find a small, unmarked envelope on her chair. Inside was a note written in Luke's careful hand. You once gave me a second chance without asking anything in return. You reminded me that some places don't need fixing, just noticing. That some people don't need saving, just someone to believe in them. This isn't a grand gesture, it's a quiet one. But if you're ready, I'd like to invite you to something better than dancing around feelings and waiting for signs. There's a place in my life for you, Savannah. Not as a CEO, but as the woman who saw me before anyone else did. Will you come home with me? Not tonight, but one day. For good. Luke Savannah read it 3 times, then once more. And when she set it down, she did something rare. She laughed. A small, delighted surprise laugh. The kind that echoed off her office walls and felt like sunlight on stone. Spring arrived in Denver the way it always did. Tentatively, like someone afraid to take up space. Patches of snow still clung to shaded sidewalks. But the air had softened. You could smell the change in it. Loam, damp leaves, fresh starts. Luke Dawson stood in what used to be a storage room on the ground floor of Hailtech, now hollowed out, cleared, and humming with the sound of a new beginning. He wiped his hands on a rag and stepped back to admire the transformation. Gone were the rusted shelves and cracked floor tiles. In their place, a row of sturdy workbenches, neatly hung tools, a wide table at the center covered in blueprints and sketches. Against one wall, a whiteboard titled Community Fix-It Initiative stood half filled with names and project ideas. It wasn't just a workshop, it was a seed, and Savannah had helped him plant it. She appeared in the doorway just past noon, carrying a to-go cup and a brown paper bag. You forgot lunch again, she said. Luke looked up, smiling. No, I just misprioritized. She handed him the bag. Roast beef and cheddar, and coffee that's actually hot. He took it gratefully. You spoil me. I consider it fuel for infrastructure. She walked the room slowly, eyes scanning the details he'd installed with care. Pegboard mounts, labeled bins, even a rack for donated materials from nearby vendors. You did all this in 2 weeks? She asked. I had help, 2 interns from maintenance, a retired contractor I met at the diner, and Lily, when she's not building a fort under the saw table. Savannah chuckled. Naturally. Luke sat on the edge of the center table, unwrapping his sandwich. Savannah leaned beside him, her voice quieter now. You know this is more than a project, right? He looked at her. You've created a space where people feel useful again, she continued, where dignity gets dusted off. Luke nodded. It's amazing what folks will fix when someone finally trusts them to. She turned toward him, searching his expression. Do you ever think about what you're building, Luke? Beyond the shelves and screws? He didn't answer right away. Then slowly, I think about how this place felt before, and how it feels now. She let that linger, then said almost hesitantly, I've been thinking about starting over. Luke's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Moving headquarters, downsizing, leaving the glass tower behind. He blinked. You're serious? She nodded. I'm tired of looking down on people. I want to build something where we look beside them. Luke leaned back. That's bold. You think I can't do bold? I think you've been bold since the day you hired a janitor without asking anyone's permission. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, clearer than words, steadier than logic. Trust, belief, something deep enough to hold the shape of hope. Later that week, they hosted the first official meeting of the Community Fix-It Initiative. The room buzzed with life, retirees, young apprentices, single parents, and volunteers of all stripes. A young mother brought in a broken stroller. A high schooler asked about restoring a rusted bike. An elderly woman requested help with her back porch steps. Luke watched it all unfold from the back, clipboard in hand, heart full. Savannah stood beside him, arms crossed, smiling. You're in your element, she said. He glanced sideways. So are you, she grinned. Don't tell the board. Already did, he said. They're asking if you're secretly running for mayor. Savannah laughed, a real laugh, unguarded and warm. God help Denver. That night they walked home together, Savannah carrying Lily on her hip, Luke pushing a rolling cart filled with donated wood. As they neared his apartment, Savannah stopped in front of the building across the street. Vacant, ivy-covered, Windows boarded, but structure intact. "What's this place?" she asked. Luke looked up. "Old bakery. Closed 10 years ago. City tried to sell it twice, but no takers." She tilted her head. "Think it could be a good school?" "For what?" "For building things. For fixing people." Luke smiled. "You mean like a trade school?" "No, like a heart school." He looked at her surprised, but she was serious. "I'm tired of watching people fall through the cracks," she said. "I want to catch some." Luke leaned on the cart, arms folded. "You thinking about giving it all up?" "No," she said. "I'm thinking of giving it all differently." He nodded slowly, the gears already turning in his mind. "I could draw up some plans." "I was hoping you would." Kiwan. They stood there a moment longer, the city humming around them, the stars just beginning to emerge through the haze. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was a beginning, and beginnings were sacred. The garden behind the new Hale Tech Community Center wasn't much. Just a modest stretch of grass bordered by native wildflowers, a few benches made from reclaimed wood, and a young maple tree that still wore its nursery tag. But that afternoon, as the sun slanted low and golden across the rooftops, it became sacred ground. Luke Dawson stood near the garden archway, adjusting the collar of his shirt, freshly ironed, if a little too snug. He'd built the arch himself, sanded each beam until it was smooth as silk, wrapped the top in white linen and twined ivy, just the way Lily had described in her dream wedding doodle. There was no altar, no aisle runner, no band. But there were people. People who mattered. The retired mechanic who helped him wire the fix-it workshop. The widow whose fence he repaired in the snow. The teenager he taught to use a handsaw. And every one of them wore something borrowed and something grateful. At the edge of the garden, a makeshift sign read, "No gifts, just presents." Lily stood beside him, solemn in a lavender dress and white sneakers, holding a tiny bouquet of wildflowers, with the seriousness of a professional florist. "You nervous, Daddy?" she asked, tilting her head. Luke smiled. "A little." "Want me to hold your hand?" He nodded. "Please." She took it, small and warm. "She's gonna look so pretty," Lily added, beaming. "I know," he said. "She always does." Just then the crowd rustled. Savannah Hale stepped into view. She didn't wear white. She wore dusty rose, a soft, flowing dress that caught the light like something out of a sunrise. Her hair was pinned simply. Her hands were empty, her expression full. She walked alone, but not unaccompanied, because every step she took seemed carried by everything she'd survived. Grief, pressure, legacy, loneliness, and the quiet joy of choosing something that was finally hers. Luke's breath caught, not because she was beautiful, though she was, but because she was here. And that was everything. When she reached him, neither of them spoke right away. There was no officiant, just a circle of family, by bond rather than blood. Luke cleared his throat. "We didn't write vows," he said quietly. Savannah nodded. "We don't need to." He looked into her eyes. "But I'd like to say something." She nodded once. "I spent most of my life building things that other people walked away from. Houses, projects, promises. But when I met you," he paused, voice catching, "you didn't walk away. You stayed, even when it got complicated, even when I didn't know what to offer." He glanced down, then back up. "And for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm building something that will last. Not because it's perfect, but because it's real." Savannah's eyes shimmered, but her smile held steady. "I never believed in rescue stories," she said. "Not the kind where someone rides in and fixes your life. But I believe in quiet people. People who show up and keep showing up. People who listen. People who help you fix yourself." She took his hand. "You didn't rescue me, Luke. You reminded me I didn't have to do everything alone." He nodded slowly. And then, without fanfare, they exchanged rings. Simple bands forged by a local craftsman who asked only for a week's worth of volunteer hours in return. The applause that followed was uncoordinated, genuine, and joyful. Lily threw flower petals at both of them until they laughed. The reception was nothing more than folding chairs, a record player, and a table stacked with homemade pies. Luke danced with Savannah under the open sky, barefoot in the grass. They didn't talk much, just held each other as the music spun slow and sweet. Later, Savannah pulled Lily into her arms, and the three of them swayed together, surrounded by lantern light and the smell of spring. It was, as someone whispered near the lemonade table, the most honest wedding they'd ever seen. That night, after the guests had gone, and Lily had fallen asleep in a blanket fort built under the arch, Savannah and Luke sat alone on one of the benches he'd built. Stars winked between tree branches. Luke looked over. "You sure you're ready for this? A life with chipped mugs and laundry that never folds itself?" Savannah leaned her head on his shoulder. "I've had the corner office, the penthouse view, the award plaques," she said. "None of it ever felt like home." Luke kissed the top of her head. "Well," he murmured, "welcome home." And for the first time in both their lives, the word didn't mean a place. It meant a person. 1 year later, the sun rose gently over the west side of Denver, spilling gold across the New Hale Community Center, once an empty bakery, now alive with voices, tools, and the steady rhythm of second chances. Inside, the morning light filtered through tall windows and spilled onto workbenches where teens learned to carve. Veterans rewired old radios, and mothers mended furniture they'd once thought unsalvageable. There were no titles here, only purpose. And Luke Dawson moved through it like a man who had always belonged, not directing with a clipboard, but guiding with a kind of invisible compass. He adjusted a student's grip on a drill. He sanded the edge of a bookshelf for a woman making her first piece. He paused to refill the coffee pot before anyone had to ask. He noticed things. That had always been his gift. Savannah stood near the back of the room, a notepad in hand and a lopsided pencil behind her ear. She wasn't there as a CEO today, or even a guest. She was just part of it. She watched Luke laugh with a young man he'd mentored, watched Lily, now 7, leading a group of kids in a birdhouse building contest that somehow also involved glitter and marshmallows. It felt messy, loud, alive. Exactly what she had wanted. Exactly what she never knew she needed. Later that day, Luke was invited to speak at a small business symposium hosted by the city. An event filled with polished presenters and carefully rehearsed pitches. His name on the roster had surprised everyone. He stood on a modest stage in a quiet auditorium, wearing his best flannel shirt and the same boots he'd repaired twice. No slideshow, no statistics, just a heart full of something real. He looked out over the crowd and said simply, "I used to think fixing things meant putting them back the way they were. Now I know it means helping them become what they were always meant to be." He told the story of the building that made him feel invisible and the woman who made him feel seen. He spoke of broken rails, forgotten corners, and the kind of quiet work that never made headlines but changed lives all the same. He finished with this: "Sometimes all a person needs is to be trusted with something that matters, and someone who sees what they're worth before the world does." The room stood in applause, not because he spoke like a leader, but because he spoke like one of them. That evening back at home, Luke and Savannah sat on their small porch, warm mugs in hand, the scent of spring in the air. Across the street, the lights from the center glowed soft and steady. Inside, volunteers swept the floor. Laughter echoed off painted brick, and Lily was helping hang a new sign near the entrance. It read, "You belong here." Savannah glanced sideways. "Do you ever miss it? The quiet?" Luke smiled. "Not even a little." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Good, because I don't either." They sat there as the world softened around them, not rushing, not waiting, content, whole. Before bed, Luke tucked Lily in and sat beside her a while. "Do you think you'll always build things?" she asked sleepily. He smiled. "I think I'll always try." "And will Mom know about Savannah?" He hesitated, then brushed her hair gently from her forehead. "I think your mom would have liked her. She would have liked that we laughed again." Lily nodded once. Then before drifting off, she whispered, "I think she'd be proud of you." Luke sat still long after she'd fallen asleep. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel empty anymore. In the final light of the day, Savannah found the old handkerchief Luke had once tucked away. She unfolded it carefully and read the words again. "Start where it's broken. Stay until it's better." She smiled and slipped it into a small wooden frame. Then she hung it by the door, a quiet reminder of where love begins and how it stays. Before you go, we'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. We're always amazed by how far these stories reach. And what part of this story touched your heart the most? Was it the little girl's drawing, the dance under the garden lights, or maybe the quiet strength of a man who just kept showing up? If this story brought you a moment of peace, hope, or inspiration, please consider subscribing to the channel. It helps us keep telling these stories, ones that remind us how powerful kindness, love, and second chances can be. Thank you for spending your time with us. Until next time, take care of your heart and keep believing in the good.